I know somebody's out there. Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
This hearing is now called to order. This is a public hearing of the Joint Committees on Public Safety and the Special Committee on Gun Violence Prevention. The purpose of this hearing is for testimony on resolution number 181110, recognizing the presence of a quorum in Councilman Green, Councilman Greenlee, myself, and Councilman Johnson, who is the chair of the Special Committee on Gun Violence, is also here and will make a statement in opening his part of the committee. Will the clerk now read the title of the resolution being considered today?
Resolution number 181110, resolution authorizing the Joint City Council Committees on Public Safety and the Special Committee on Gun Violence Prevention to hold public hearings examining the administration's reports on community-based gun violence prevention program and a comprehensive violence prevention strategy in light of the escalating acts of gun violence in the city of Philadelphia, and to ensure that the city's public safety budget reflects the priorities of these plans.
So first and foremost, I want to thank all of the committee members on both committees, but say emphatically that this has been the passion of my co-chair, Councilman Johnson, going back before he was elected, while he is elected, and going forward, I guess, for his whole life to deal with this issue. And I'm thankful that he agreed to do this joint hearing. I want to say in my statements, and I'll turn it over to my co-chair, I want to thank you for coming out, but maybe you don't know this, but there are 48 zip codes in the city of Philadelphia. And where you live, what zip code you live in, should not be the determining factor of how long you live on this earth. There are many articles that show, based on where you live, can determine your longevity. That should not be the case in the city of Philadelphia. The issue of intense violence cycles occurs throughout the city was not created overnight, and it won't be solved overnight. But today, we can begin to plant the seeds that will bear fruit for future generations far to come. There is a shared prosperity that is needed in every zip code in the city of Philadelphia. We literally have developers developing around teddy bear memorials where gun violence has occurred. And it's not just a South Philly thing, it's not just a North Philly thing, it goes up into the northwest portions of our city and even Center City. I will let you in on a secret. The school to prison pipeline is a real thing. It's been demonstrated. As a human relations commissioner, there are people that are looking at this as a new civil rights issue. I want you to know that we can begin to put together a process of a school to paycheck pipeline. And a part of the study of what we're going to talk about today can deal with that as well. I used to go to Thanksgivings over my aunt's house, and we always had on the refrigerator a photo of Kennedy, MLK, and now Barack Obama on her refrigerator. These are heroes in the inner city culture. But one of the things that we need to create, and we've been hearing from individuals, we need modern day heroes that don't have to sacrifice their life to be heroes, but can sacrifice their time, their talent, and their treasuries. And many of them we will hear from in our second audience, our second hearing coming up shortly. We need to create postman heroes, business owner heroes, fraternity and sorority sheroes and heroes. There was a meeting with President Clark in his district. A young man said to us, and we were having a real rap conversation, he said the only time that he saw a man in a suit. They either were going to church on Sunday or they were representing law enforcement in some way. That same individual said that the only time he went downtown was either to buy some sneakers or to go to court. In that analysis of their 10-block world is the root of the problem. And we need to address that as well. We need to do that by working with faith-based organizations, which I'm going to hear in the testimony today. We need place-based economic development. We need a criminal justice reform that reinvests in the savings. When we close the House of Correction, some of that money needs to go to prevention instead of reentry. We need to be paying for pre-entry. And these are concepts we want to explore. We're all in here working together. I vouch for, let me just look again, every individual in here wanting to do good. I believe that. We have to figure out today in today's hearings and in a budget process to follow, doing good, how much does good cost, and where do we get the money to pay for the good we want to do. I believe that we can offer some solutions. It won't come every day. It'll come a little every day, but during the course of this budget process, we have to figure out what every silo in government's role is to play in the solution to this. And at the end of the day, we have to put our money where our mouth is. I appreciate the work that this administration is doing, Mayor Kenny, and all of you, but we have a role to play too. We have to make sure that the car to shared prosperity has gas in it, and that we're not just talking, but we put our safety first. And that's what we hope to do. We want to start that process today. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Councilman Johnson.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
First and foremost, I want to thank my colleague, Chairman of the Committee on Public Safety, Councilman Curtis Jones, for calling forth this hearing and allowing me to partner with him as we specifically address the issue of gun violence and violence prevention here in the city of Philadelphia. Specifically, with this hearing, it will allow us to see the actual steps that the administration is going to take with the, I think it was the significant investment that the mayor is proposing for this upcoming budget to address the issue of gun violence and violence prevention here in the city of Philadelphia. And so I'm going to be brief in my remarks. I want to start off by acknowledging the individuals who are here from the Special Committee on Gun Violence. And I want to thank them for taking time out of their schedule for coming down to participate in this dialogue on a most critically important issue. I want to start off by, obviously we have here our Councilman Curtis Jones, who's a co-chair of the Special Committee on Gun Violence. We have Mr. Robert Reed, who's the Deputy Attorney General from the Attorney General's Office. Jude Conroy, Interim Supervisor on the Gun Violence Task Force from the District Attorney's Office. Brandon O'Malley, Chief of the Gun Violence Task Force of the Attorney General's Office. Tim Farlow, Deputy Commissioner for Division of Juvenile Justice Services, Department of Human Services. George Mosey, Executive Director of Philadelphia Anti-Drug, Anti-Violence Network. Mr. Bilal Qayyum, Director of the Father's Day Rally Committee, Philadelphia Anti-Violence Coalition. Joel Fine, Director of Advocacy and Health Policy, Emergency Department at Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. Ms. Alida Garcia, Founder of the National Homicide Justice Alliance. Mr. Anthony Murphy, Executive Director of Town Watch Integrated Services. Mr. Benny Price, Deputy Chief, Juvenile Probation and Parole Department. Mr. Myron Patterson, First Deputy Commissioner of Philadelphia Police Department. Ms. Dorothy Johnson Spite, Founder and National Executive Director of Mothers in Charge. Ms. Julie Wertheimer, Senior Director of Criminal Justice Reform Strategies and Programs, Office of Criminal Justice. Mr. Shondell Ravel, Executive Director of the Office of Violence Prevention. And I also would like to acknowledge a young lady who, well, she's making a transition. She currently serves as she was the interim supervisor for victim services of the district attorney's office, but now she will be joining us in the General Assembly in my former home in Harrisburg as a state representative, Ms. Movita Johnson-Harrell. Can we give her a round of applause, please? First and foremost, I am critically excited about her transition to the General Assembly. I'm proud of me becoming the first African-American to ever represent the second councilmanic district. I've served in the state house and was a strong advocate around the issue of gun violence, but most importantly, family members and victims of gun violence who so much need a voice at the table when we talk about the issue of gun violence. And so I'm glad that she's going to go up there and shake some things up, because there's other people who serve in the state house that's not from the city of Philadelphia. They can care less about the plight that we are facing here in the city of Philadelphia or this hearing that we're having. But I believe that with her leadership and most importantly, her passion on this topic, that she can really bring forth some transformative change in the General Assembly. So you have my 110% support on this issue as you fight in Harrisburg. And so if any other members are here, I just want to thank you for also attending this hearing, and make sure that my legislative aide, Mr. Joshua Harris, has your name, and I will acknowledge your presence for the record. Also want to acknowledge Mr. Michael Cockbill, formerly member of Philadelphia Ceasefire, who always steps up to the plate when it comes to the issue of gun violence here in the city of Philadelphia. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Are any other comments from committee members? So before we offer up the mic, I want everybody to know that we will have a second hearing. And when is that, Ms. Williams?
April 29th at 2 p.m.
And the reason we split it up that way is because this issue is not one of those gloss over issues where we get testimony from the city of Philadelphia, and then in the last portion of the hearing, we get public testimony. We want to give equal weight to the comments of people who do it every day, who see it in every way, so that they have an opportunity to hear what the police commissioner and the deputy mayor have to say, and then be able to come up with a coherent response and suggestions thereafter. So with that, will you, Councilman?
And just want to also acknowledge Arun Prapakan, who's the Chief of Staff for Larry Krasner, District Attorney in the City of Philadelphia, and also Mr. Michael Lee. That's it, sir.
Got it. Ms. Williams, will you please read the first panel to testify?
Vanessa Garrett Harley, who's accompanied by Theron Pride, and Deputy Commissioner Dennis Wilson.
Well, thank you. You've been here before, so let's pull those mics a little closer. State your name for the record, and please begin your testimony.
Good afternoon. My name is Vanessa Garrett Harley, Deputy Managing Director for Criminal Justice and Public Safety for the City of Philadelphia, Managing Director's Office. Good afternoon, Chair Jones and Co-Chair Johnson, and members of the Joint Committee on Public Safety and the Special Committee on Gun Violence Prevention. With me today is Deputy Commissioner Dennis Wilson for the Philadelphia Police Department and Theron Pride, Senior Director for Violence Prevention Strategies and Programs, as well as other members of my leadership team. Thank you for allowing me to testify today regarding the Mayor's Violence Prevention Plan entitled The Philadelphia Roadmap to Safer Communities. The fiscal year 20 to 24 proposed 5-year plan includes $31.5 million to support this effort. However, before I say more on what our plan involves and the funds we need to implement it, I would like to take this opportunity to personally thank you for your strong leadership and impassioned advocacy to stem gun violence in our neighborhoods and all the work you've done to help the administration develop the roadmap to safer communities. So thank you. Let me start by providing you with some background on why fully funding this plan to reduce and prevent gun violence is so critical. For decades, the gun violence rate in Philadelphia has been among the highest of big cities in the United States, peaking at 505 homicides in 1990. While the overall violent crime rate in Philadelphia has declined to its lowest levels in decades, the city's homicide rate has reached the highest level since 2007, with 351 homicides in the year 2018. And most of these homicides, approximately 84%, involved a firearm. In addition, there were over 1,400 shootings in the city last year as well. This means that in 2018, we came close to having someone in our city killed every day, typically by a gun, and averaged nearly 4 shootings a day. But these statistics only tell part of the story. The enormous impact gun violence has in our communities and all of us that live and work here in Philadelphia goes far deeper than what these crime numbers show. Ultimately, gun violence and the threat of gun violence is about the lives harmed and lost, the sense of safety shattered, and the ensuing pain that friends, families, and neighbors struggle with long after these traumatic incidents occur. In fact, as we visited the communities hardest hit by violence in the city, we witnessed the traumatic and emotional toll that gun violence has on residents. We heard children talk about seeing loved ones being killed in the street. We wept with mothers that buried their sons, and we even saw up close the fear in neighbors' eyes as a shooting occurred outside one of our community meetings. Sadly, gun violence is far too common in our city. As one young person told us, it's not a question of whether there will be a shooting in the city. The question is only whether they will be the next victim. Gun violence also significantly impacts our local economy. Here at home, it is estimated that the average cost associated with a gun homicide is approximately $1.42 million. These costs consist of the medical expenses, lost earnings and productivity, property damage, and criminal justice-related costs. Additionally, a non-fatal firearm-related injury is estimated to cost $46,632 in medical expenses and lost productivity. Based on these conservative estimates, the total economic burden to Philadelphia resulting from gun violence in 2018 alone will likely exceed over $500 million, and much of these costs are paid for by taxpayers through Medicaid, public safety budgets, and the criminal justice system. In short, gun violence impacts all of us, whether by way of the pain we feel when a loved one is harmed or killed by gun violence, or by the way the heavy economic burden we all bear as the shootings and homicides in our city continue. This is precisely why Mayor Kinney called out gun violence as a public health crisis, as many of you have too, and issued a call to action to prevent gun violence that would involve taking a markedly different approach that does not rely solely on policing. Instead, the mayor directed us to use a public health approach to address gun violence that relies on data and science to identify the most effective strategies to solve the problem. As a result, we now have the Philadelphia Roadmap to Safer Communities, or the Roadmap as it is referred to further on. In all, the Roadmap is a 5-year comprehensive action plan to reduce and prevent gun violence in the city, which envisions that every Philadelphian will be safe from gun violence in their communities with full access to opportunities to create their path to a fulfilling life. Using a public health approach to address gun violence, we brought together multiple city agencies and partners, including police, to develop the roadmap that integrates evidence-based strategies that focuses on not only apprehending the most violent individuals, but also on promoting health and well-being in our communities, especially among the individuals most vulnerable to gun violence. Most importantly, by using data and research from public health, police, and other agencies, and listening to the people in communities most impacted by gun violence, we have developed a better understanding of what is driving the violence in Philadelphia and applied that knowledge in the roadmap to implement what works to address the root causes of gun violence. The roadmap also lays out 4 major goals that places a special emphasis on the young people in places at the highest risk of violence. And it includes the short-term objectives we plan to achieve this year, because we must act now, as well as the long-term objectives we plan to achieve by 2024. Goal 1 is focused on making sure young people and their families at the highest risk of violence are connected to needed services and supports. This includes working to connect these individuals to education and meaningful employment opportunities. Goal 2 is about strengthening our engagement in communities impacted by violence to better assist local efforts to address this problem. For example, this involves launching a targeted community investment grant program to support more community-based and community-led efforts to reduce violence. Goal 3 aims to improve how well city services and planning efforts related to violence prevention are coordinated. Under this goal, we look to implement the neighborhood resource centers to provide place-based supports to those on supervision or reintegrating from a period of incarceration, as well as offering support to their families. Lastly, Goal 4 is about creating safer and healthier neighborhoods where people have an increased sense of safety and can thrive in the communities where they live, work, and play. As part of this goal, we plan to ensure trauma-informed care is widely available in communities and environmental factors such as blight are addressed in high-risk areas to better deter violent crime. Following the release of the roadmap in January, we have since convened an executive team to lead the implementation of the plan. That team is co-chaired by myself and Philadelphia Police Commissioner Richard Ross. This team also includes the commissioners for public health, prisons, human services, behavioral health and intellectual disabilities, parks and recreation, as well as other senior leadership from the mayor's office, the managing director's office, the Office of Workforce Development, the Health and Human Services Cabinet Cluster, the Office of Violence Prevention, Philadelphia Works, and the Philadelphia School District. We have also established action teams to quickly move on achieving the objectives in our plan related to workforce development, education, communications, community-based services, neighborhood revitalization, and data and evaluation. Each team has key representatives from the city agencies and departments involved in the roadmap to ensure we are leveraging all available resources to maximize our impact within each of these focus areas. Moreover, by establishing an action team responsible for data and evaluation, we are prioritizing the importance of using data to drive our decision-making and testing whether the strategies we are implementing in the roadmap are achieving the desired outcomes. In other words, before we widely implement any program or policy focused on violence reduction and prevention, we want to make sure our investments are working, and we will adjust our plan as needed based on what we learn from the data we are able to collect and the results from our evaluations. Thanks to the commitment from Mayor Kinney and the support from City Council, we received funds in fiscal year 2019 to start implementing the strategies outlined in the roadmap. However, to move forward fully on addressing the size and scope of this problem, the mayor has proposed additional funds in fiscal year 2020 to further advance the goals and objectives we set out to accomplish in the roadmap. Specifically, the mayor's proposed 5-year plan includes $7.2 million to support the police violence reduction strategy, Operation Pinpoint. This strategy employs a combination of intelligence-based and community-oriented policing. The funding includes provisions for increased technology and additional analysts. $11.8 million in total for neighborhood resource centers over the next few years, with $994,727 in fiscal year 20. These funds will support piloting these community-based centers where adults on probation can report in their neighborhood and access important services and supports that will help to successfully integrate them back into their communities and lower the likelihood of recidivism. $4.25 million, with $1 million in FY20 for the Office of Violence Prevention to support the expansion of the Youth Violence Reduction Partnership, or YVRP, into further police districts and to hire additional credible messengers as part of the expansion of the Community Crisis Intervention Program, CCIP, as well as providing small grants to the community-based anti-violence organizations. $6.3 million in total for the Department of Licenses and Inspections, with $1.75 in fiscal year 20. The department will use these funds to focus on reducing blight and securing, and where necessary, demolishing unsafe structures in targeted neighborhoods. As I stated earlier, the problem of gun violence impacts all of us. And while the problem of gun violence is very complex, The challenge is not insurmountable. With the right strategy and tools, and with all of us working together, I know we can reduce and prevent gun violence in our communities. Thank you for allowing me to testify today. We look forward to our continued partnership with this committee and City Council. My staff and I, as well as others from the administration helping us to implement the roadmap, are available to answer any questions you may have about our violence prevention plan.
Thank you for your testimony. Why don't we let everybody testify that is going to testify, and then we can open up for questions and answers. Is that all right? I'm sorry, Mr. Chair. Co-chair. Mr. Johnson.
Just want to acknowledge another one of our members, Mr. Darren Tolliver, juvenile justice advocate, for being here as well. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
For the record, we also have joining us Councilwoman Janie Blackwell.
Thank you, Ms. Garrett Harley. Good afternoon, Chairman Jones and members of City Council. I'm Dennis Wilson, Deputy Commissioner of Special Operations. I'm here today on behalf of Commissioner Ross. He could not be here today. He's away on police-related business. He sends his regards and asked me to come here today and speak to you about our work with the Philadelphia Roadmap to Safer Communities and to share some details about Operation Pinpoint as part of the collaborative strategy to combat gun violence using this roadmap to safer communities. The roadmap offers a holistic approach to combating and preventing gun violence. Given the various societal challenges that contribute to gun violence, this is a collaborative approach involving the health department, social service providers, community groups, community members, community influencers, and many others. While the police play a critical role in combating gun violence, we've known for a while that we cannot arrest our way out of this problem. And as a member of the Public Safety Cabinet, working collaboratively like this with the Office of Violence Prevention is a welcome partnership. As co-chair of the executive level implementation team, Commissioner Ross is making sure law enforcement strategies are carried out. The police department recognizes that there is no singular remedy for the prevalence of gun violence on our streets. Accordingly, we employ a comprehensive, intelligence-led, strategic approach to combating gun violence. All of these strategies play crucial roles in effective gun crime reduction and all crime reduction, crime deterrence, swift apprehension of prolific offenders, and the prompt disruption of criminal networks. A centerpiece of our strategic approach to combating the prevalence of gun violence is Operation Pinpoint. Operation Pinpoint is a multifaceted, intelligence-led, crime fighting and information sharing strategy designed to identify, collect, analyze, and use information needed to target the worst violent offenders and areas. The strategy supports Philadelphia Police Department work to reduce crime and enhance the quality of life in Philadelphia. Accountability is critical to Pinpoint success. Accountability is supported with weekly and bi-weekly ComStat meetings, as well as quarterly crime-fighting strategy meetings. In each, commanders and officers from the districts and focus grids examine evaluations that are based in scientific assessment of objective data. The work is performed collaboratively in an objective, fair, and measurable manner. It's done based on law enforcement and intelligence community best practices. While led by the police department, Pinpoint is a multi-agency law enforcement and crime reduction initiative. It leverages the resources of multi-agencies and criminal justice organizations at local, state, and federal levels. Through coordinated intelligence efforts and targeted deployment strategies, we work together to reduce violent crime in the city's most volatile areas. Pinpoint is focused primarily in designated zones within 7 police districts. The target areas are constantly re-examined for updated crime patterns and to determine whether any shifts in focus are needed. Individualized plans and goals are set for each area based on the unique problems and characteristics of the impacted community. The Operation Pinpoint approach involves an integrated, intelligence-led community policing strategy. increase personnel resources in designated zones, pursuit of all active, bench, state probation and parole, and fugitive warrants for people in the designated zones, pursuit of juvenile warrants, ensuring code compliance by all commercial bars and commercial establishments, particularly those with a history of nuisance complaints, enhanced intelligence gathering, monitoring, and deployment based on the most accurate and up-to-date data, deployment of resources to prevent retaliation following violence in targeted zones, pursuit of priority narcotics cases using city, state, and federal resources, heightened community relations and public education campaign in targeted zones. The targeted areas currently include Southwest Division, the 12th District, in East Division, 24th and 25th Districts, in Northwest Division, the 35th District, in Central Division, the 22nd District, in Northeast Division, the 15th District, in South Division, the 17th District. Pinpoint supports the overarching department-wide strategic plan with a particular focus on combining community-oriented policing and targeted intelligence-led policing. It aims to combine the best of these approaches to benefit everyone, and it relies on community input. Community members' concerns and information offer critically helpful information. They are eyes and ears on the street with access to unique information that may not otherwise be available to law enforcement. While only in operation for a brief amount of time, Pinpoint looks to be moving in a good direction with officers and commanders focused on using Pinpoint strategies and tools to drive the mission of combating and preventing gun violence every day. And with the continued support of the mayor and in collaboration with our business, agency, and community partners, we believe the Philadelphia Road to a Safe Communities can impact the level of gun violence in Philadelphia. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, let me start out with the fact, recognizing my colleague Helen Gim, who is here and has joined us. And I just went up and down the panel. How many departments and agencies does the city of Philadelphia have? I heard low end 30, high end 70, depending on if you consider a quasi-governmental agency a part of the tree. So of that, that question stands out there. How many of them do you see as a part of this plan?
I don't know the exact number of city departments, but we certainly can provide that to you as a part of this plan. It's somewhere around 20 or so that have been involved.
So 20, and I'm assuming you've been in constant contact with them to talk about their individual role within the plan. Is that accurate?
Yes, as part of implementing the plan, we've established the governance structure. That structure consists of an executive level implementation team that is led by myself and Police Commissioner Ross. We meet bi-weekly because of the urgency of the subject matter, obviously, but we've also recently established subcommittees or action teams, as we call them, that are in touch on a weekly basis, whether face-to-face or via telephone, to drill down to more specific areas, and then they will report up to the executive level team. So there is constant work going on with representatives from the various, particularly out of that 20, maybe 15 or so, most key partners, yes.
Okay. So of those 20, and how much of this plan is new money versus redeployment of existing dollars that were already planned to be spent over this upcoming fiscal year?
So the $31.5 million is the allocation that I would say is new money that came from the mayor to be invested. I mean, it's kind of hard. There are some budgeted dollars that would have went to OVP and others as well, but the total investment for the upcoming year for FY20 is the $31.5 million.
So that's new money.
For the most part, I don't know if all of it is new money. There may be pieces of it that is broken down within some of the individual department budget, but this is money that was slated particularly for gun violence prevention based on the recommendations that we made in the roadmap to safer communities.
So speaking only for myself, I'm okay whether it is new money or reallocated money that we found somewhere else and are dedicating to this. That's not the issue for me, but what is good is that we know it's going to be used for this. So in our future budget meetings, what would be helpful to me as a person who determines budgets, if we're dealing with the police department, say this is redeployed money that we've had, or this is actual new dollars that will be asked for by the city council to provide to you. Drilling down in case in point, we have in Operation Pinpoint, do we use the real-time crime center down in Oregon?
Absolutely, that's a big part of this operation.
All right, and we have, for those who don't know, roughly how many cameras that are strategically deployed around the city?
Mike, you know that answer? 550.
And that does not include SEPTA's cameras, PHA's cameras, and others. So it could be even wider, right?
That's correct.
All right. The difference, though, in other cities, which I would hope that whether it's in year 1 or year 5, what makes a difference is if we have live eyes on those cameras that do virtual patrols. Currently, and correct me if I'm wrong, we have cameras, but we go to those cameras often, not all, but often after the fact. In other cities, they have retired policemen or civically engaged personnel that do virtual patrols. And they may have 10 cameras that they're responsible for. And the more they develop that intelligence, it goes back to create prevention efforts as opposed to just responses. Because I can name 10 corners in my district that are hot as fish grease and that need to be constantly looked at. But the question is, does the budget allow for live eyes on those cameras? So that's generally my question.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. The more eyes on these cameras, the better off we would be at preventing gun violence. We have very limited resources to do that. We do preventive patrol, but it's real small numbers. Other departments, like you said, have a lot of personnel monitoring these cameras. That could really help us. We just don't have the resources.
So within the 5-year plan, is there a plan to deploy more personnel on actual cameras to go towards a preventive model? And if so, how many?
So, sir, currently as we...
You gotta say your name.
I'm sorry, Inspector Michael McCarrick from the Intelligence Bureau. I oversee the
Come sit in
real-time...
the chair.
I oversee the Real-Time Crime Center. As we currently existed, when you came, when you take the visit, we do have limited resources that are in-house that we're capable of monitoring. However, that capability has been expanded out to the entire city. So each district has personnel in their districts that they're utilizing personnel that have administrative duty or for other purposes. They're being repurposed for that. This ask, I do not believe it encompasses to monitor all 550 cameras. We're currently expanding this year, I believe, with another additional 100 cameras. But they all do record. We maintain the data. What we do target every day, our intelligence-led approach generates a list of the 10 most prolific cameras where crime has occurred over the previous 24 hours. They are ultimately immediately targeted for monitoring, active full-time monitoring, and then the cameras are being utilized once again in the field with some of our administrative personnel to focus on pinpoint areas. We're focusing in on those most problematic corners and monitoring them and then coordinating that information with all of our partners to address it.
So in the 5-year plan, eyes on, working with boots on the ground, so year 1, we're going to have 25 new intelligence officers. Year 2, 25 more, aggregate number 50. Have you thought that through that far?
We began with this pilot, this portion, I don't want to call it a pilot, but each district has about 15 new intelligence officers that are working in each district. Then part of this budget request was to expand the capabilities in our house by 40 additional officers down there. So as we expand out into other districts, probably looking at about 15 officers per tour around the clock. I mean, total for the district around the clock.
Councilman Johnson.
Thank you. Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you. So we'll do a follow-up question since we're talking about the budget and specifically at this point in time, Operation Pinpoint and law enforcement. First and foremost, I want to commend the AG's office, the District Attorney's office, the Philadelphia Police Department, Gun Violence Task Force. They were able to take off the streets some known offenders in my district of Point Breeze and Grays Ferry that were pretty much raising about 90% of the havoc in our neighborhoods as it relates to gun violence. So I want to commend them from their work. But how much of the budget proposal goes toward expanding the Philadelphia Gun Violence Task Force to specifically go after those who carry the guns and where the guns are coming from, strictly from a law enforcement standpoint?
I don't know the answer to that. Do you know, Mike?
So, of the budget, I'm sorry, once again, of the budget, that would be part of that expansion of the 40 additional officers with criminal intelligence. We worked closely with Pat Mangold, the task force. In regard to that, that was our personnel that were assigned with them. The task force model is part of our Pinpoint philosophy moving forward. We currently have a secondary initiative going on with that will be under the umbrella of Pinpoint.
Thank you.
So can you, for those of us who are not as in tune with that, so I remember focused deterrent, now Pinpoint, can you give me the salient differences between the two models?
So Operation Pinpoint kind of is an umbrella. It incorporates all those previous disciplines that you heard of, focused deterrence, the foot patrol, bicycle patrol models. It incorporates that along with community policing. It looks to, it's a cultural change on how we process and handle intelligence information and how we coordinate that with our other agencies. So with the way we currently exist now with the Intelligence Bureau, we do have those partners in-house. As you mentioned, the Attorney General's office has a seat in our building. Adult probation, juvenile probation, all those agencies exist with us, and we're sharing that information and focusing on the geographical areas that are driving our crime. But as you indicated, those individuals that have the most propensity for violence and are pushing the violence in those areas. So by taking them off, we hope to stem those feuds or those street level issues that are going on to reduce our crime.
And just, I have a couple other questions since we're talking about law enforcement and the budget. I know the mayor has proposed, I think it's $30 million over the next 5 years, roughly $6 million a year. And just want to get an idea of, one, the portion of the budget and resources that will go towards solving homicides. I think the homicides clearing rate, that will be one component. And then two, I know on the juvenile probation side, they utilize ankle bracelet monitoring for non-violent offenders, right? Are we looking at taking on that model, or something along the lines of if an individual is non-violent, you get arrested because you went in the Rite Aid and stole some deodorant or something, you get arrested and so forth. Are we looking at different models besides just totally, individual being arrested and sent away, where if it's a non-violent offense, the opportunity for them to be like on an ankle bracelet monitoring?
So you do that.
So, yeah, we partner with juvenile probation with the ankle monitoring system and our information exchange. If we're looking at this point to target the most prolific offenders by reducing the violence in the areas, reducing the fear of violence in the areas, but the strategy itself is that partnership with the community to identify those quality of life issues that are driving crime in the area, and then developing through a comprehensive plan with our partners here in this initiative to target those issues that are not just police-related matters. The district attorney's office, there's been some discussion about moving forward with how they would process probation and all going
All right,
forward.
and I don't want to hog the mic, so I'm going to wrap up on this. One, I do commend the commissioner, your team for, what's the official name for the quality life officers that are going out in the community, knocking on the neighbors' doors, asking about what the issues are inside the neighborhood?
So it's the community relations teams, but we neighborhood resource officers
Neighborhood
through our
resource
planning.
officers,
Yeah,
yes.
through our planning phase, we identify.
How many
those.
have been deployed thus far? Do you know?
At this point, 2 of the districts that have engaged in the pinpoint planning have identified 2 officers. The other districts, what part of our analysis that goes with pinpoint is to identify those best practices to push that out citywide for other areas to incorporate. So we believe that each and every district is going to employ neighborhood resource officers for this mission.
No, I think that's effective simply for the fact that, one, if you're going to solve a homicide, there needs to be a greater and a better relationship between the community and the Philadelphia Police Department. So when you have these officers out there walking the beat, engaging with the residents regarding the quality of life issues, that helps build a relationship. But also, I want to give a shout out to Inspector Dales, and there's also a new captain in the 12th Police District. His name isn't
Driscoll.
in Driscoll, and also Captain O'Donnell that's inside the 17th Police District, really trying to figure out ways to engage the community. But also, I know from working with Inspector Dales directly, showing up at some of the doorsteps of some of these guys that's carrying the guns. Like, we may not catch you in the act, but we know you're doing it. So, I know literally firsthand, knock on these guys' doors and say, listen, we know what you're doing, right? We can try to help you with some resources, but we putting you on notice that we know you're one of the guys that's shooting up the neighborhood. You're one of the shooters. And how do you want to address this? If we could do more of that, right? Because we want to do the proactive stuff. Like, we'll talk in the next half about being proactive, the community resources, and getting young people involved in good things. That's a part of it, right? But I'm talking about the shooters. I'm talking about the shooters that can care less that we're here having this hearing today. The shooters that when we walk in the neighborhood and we're doing the prayer vigil and the rally, they're on the side laughing and giggling. I'm being frank with you, right? The shooters that show up at the prayer vigil while we're doing the prayer vigil to see if there's anybody inside the crowd who's going to talk, right? I mean, I have an interest in addressing that issue because, in North Philadelphia, you have an old man who was robbed for $20 and they said, I'm going to shoot you in the face anyway, right? In South Philadelphia, you have a young man that goes to the corner store, he has brains blown out. So I have a strong interest in, going after the individual who, I just don't want to be a part of what's going on that's positive. I want to be one of the guys that's, I'm about it, this is what I do. And so I do commend you for that engagement component. And hopefully with this budget moving forward, we can expand it to make sure that we're engaging the ones who are the shooters, and hopefully that level of aggressive engagement to get them to think about putting the guns down and think about doing something else that's positive. So
You're right about that we like that strategy. We're using that all over the city. We have used it for a long time, but we are ramping that up, and every district captain is doing that right now. In some cases it works, and in some cases they don't care who's knocking on their door.
For those bad actors, they need to know we got the right hand of fellowship or the left hand of punishment. Pick a hand. Councilwoman, Kim? You good? Oh, Councilman Green.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Got it.
Excuse me. Good afternoon, everybody. This is slightly off to the side, but since we're talking about budgets, is there state money involved in any of these programs as we're speaking, or is this all what we're talking about funded by the city?
So we do receive some state grant money, but this 31.5 we're talking about is what's funded by the city.
Okay.
So there may be additional funds. For example, we received some PCCD, Pennsylvania Commission on Crime and Delinquency money this year. We certainly hope to be able to receive some additional next year, but we're talking about the allocation in the mayor's budget.
No, I got you. The reason I bring that up is that obviously, reading papers, watching TV, where gun violence is the biggest problem here in Philadelphia. It's problems in other parts of the state also.
York.
Some are surrounding counties, Reading, York, probably a lot of other places. And I was just wondering, is there any coordination with, say, some of the leaders in those counties or those cities to work together and to help, like, for example, the new state representative as she comes in, to advocate for programs that can help, more resources from the state is what I guess. We'd like more laws too. I'm not sure how possible that is right now, but at least some resources.
I can tell you at the enforcement level,
Pardon me?
at the enforcement level,
Yeah.
we're getting a lot of support from the state.
Okay.
We're working, on the narcotics end, they're actually paying our guys overtime, reimbursable overtime on Saturdays to come in the Kensington area to do joint investigations. There's a lot of cooperation on that level.
Okay, all right. Okay, yeah, because I think, like I said, Philadelphia certainly has the biggest problem, but
We're not the
we're
only one.
unfortunately not alone in this, I'm sure you all know. All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilman. Also, I'd like to recognize Councilman Tollenberger has joined us. Councilwoman?
Great, thank you very much. Could you talk a little bit about how you coordinate with the school district at all for young people when it comes to, incidents or, crimes that happen within vicinities of the school, or how you coordinate with internal programs within the district, school district, that is?
So at this point, the school district is was a member of the team that created the roadmap to Safer Communities, the working group, and Dr. Hyatt as well as Karen Lynch are members of the executive level of the implementation team as part of that team. So very aligned. Many of the short-term action items as well as some long-term items involve working directly with the school district. We have a subcommittee on education that will actually be working on a number of issues, everything from looking at attendance levels, truancy, to alternative programs. We also have the Office of Adult Education involved as well, so that we can determine what are the best ways to bring up the educational levels of many of the perpetrators and/or victims, so that we can use that in terms of working in conjunction with the Office of Workforce Development in terms of career readiness. If you are asking about specific incidents that occur in school, I'm not sure I got.
No, I
get
mean,
your
one of the
question.
frustrations that we've traditionally had with the school district of Philadelphia is that they don't have a coordinated crisis response. When incidences happen that either involve the school, members of the school community, extended school community, or within the vicinity of a school. So, there's a crisis response that they define for acts of God, hurricanes, tornadoes, anthrax, terrorist attacks, and other types of things, but they don't have anything when they don't, I won't say anything, we have worked for a long time to push the district to have a coordinated crisis response. So if there is an incident of violence that happens within the community that impacts student groups or bodies that are potentially connected, is there any kind of effort that goes into place? 1, counseling, 2, dialogue, 3, negotiations, or any kind of discussions between between your department and the school district to ensure that things don't carry into a school or escalate within the school and then spill out externally? It just seems like a lot of young people experience and witness a tremendous amount of violence that is traumatizing. They go into school communities where it's dense. People are either ignorant of, maybe not by intent or anything, but aren't necessarily particularly responsive to. These things get negotiated in kind of supervised areas, either the hallway, cafeterias, bathrooms, stairwells. can maybe escalate and then go back into streets. And so we have been talking for almost over a decade with the district about its failure to have a responsible crisis response in terms of real crises that happen within schools, not terrorist attacks, bombings, and acts of God, but real crises that involve violence that can, for some young people, be occurring on a regular basis in and around, particularly some specific schools.
Absolutely. We have that in place. We have a police inspector from Philadelphia PD assigned. It's his full-time job to work with the Office of School Climate and Safety. We have, at the Real-Time Crime Center, we monitor social media. We get wind of any rumor of any kind of problems. We work with the school Office of Safety, and we have Philadelphia Police and school police together working on that problem. We get in touch with the principal. We've held meetings at the school and notified the parents, whatever it takes. But that's real time right now. We're getting these any time of day or night. We're all getting it right on our phone, and we begin working on it immediately.
So could you walk me through it a little bit? So I know that there's always high-level coordination, and that is like very common. The problem is that what we often see is that it never makes its way down at the school level at the time that and I think you just alluded to it very quickly, but it doesn't make it down like in a moment to moment when something is happening and when crises can escalate. We were dealing with it, for example, several times at like South Philadelphia High School and Furness High School almost a decade ago. But if a shooting occurs or an incident of gun violence occurs within a vicinity of school involving young people, walk me through what happens at 8 a.m. when school starts the very next day. Like, what's the coordinated thing that happens?
All right, on the police end of this, and this happens a lot. A lot of our efforts right now with the school is a result of threats. A lot of them are unfounded,
Right.
but we do get them. Usually it's off hours. We will have uniformed police. We'll have members of our tactical operations out at the school, working with the school police and the school officials. Because we don't want anything to happen.
Yeah, exactly. Do you usually coordinate with the principal? Do you go through counseling? Do you have relationships like? Are there designated individuals? Is it only the principal, or is there any other additional people
Well,
that
there's
that you work with?
definitely the principal. The principal and each of our 21 captains are supposed to all have a relationship. I know when I was a captain, when Inspector McCarrick was a captain, we knew all our principals. They had our cell phone number. They could call us. That's still going on. We encourage that. We train our new captains to develop that partnership. So we have that. We have the inspector that's assigned to the school district as part of that network as well.
And so the uniformed police at the school are there mostly as in their capacity as police officers external to the school building. Do you have relationships internal within the school building, particularly focused in on counseling, restorative justice, and mediation or de-escalation kind of techniques?
Could you repeat that again?
So I know you said that if there's an incident that happens at a school, obviously we want to guarantee the safety of young people at a school. Very often what young people will see is they'll see a significant police presence external to the school building. On the outside of the school, there might be police officers in uniform, police cars, and other types of things. But once they enter into the school, there isn't still that coordinated effort that happens with young people, some of whom, like, first of all, like they're inside the building now, so that's not like an issue necessarily of like physical safety on the inside, but they're dealing with like either fear, anger, trauma, and is there, that you're aware of, are you aware of like resources that go into the school following the day or hours after or whatever is happening, to ensure that those young people get access to dialogue, counseling, mediation efforts, restorative justice practices, trauma-informed efforts to help them deal with what's been happening more broadly.
Yeah, I think
within.
that would be more in the lane of the school district, not the police.
Right. And then do you feel like when you say that there is coordination between, with the school district and at the very top levels, are you positive that that's happening at the school-based level in the hours or days after an incident of gun violence occurs within the vicinity of a school?
I'm positive. It is happening. In addition to what I already said about that, we have a morning call. Commissioner Ross has all the commanders call in at 8:10 every morning. One of the members on that call is the inspector assigned to the schools. He'll let us know if there's any issues, and that's even a whisper of something that could happen, and we put all our resources on that. It is important to stay ahead of that, and I think we've been doing a pretty good job of that.
Mm-hmm. And,
did that answer your question?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I think we should continue to work on it because I think it's, worth...
We're positive on our end that we are jumping on these with all the resources available.
Mm-hmm.
And
I'm just trying to understand the coordination with the school district that happens within the school at the time in the hours immediately after a gun violence incident that is focused primarily on service to students within the school, dealing with trauma, mediation, and restorative justice practices.
So that would really not be our lane.
So, Councilwoman Gim, the school district, as I said, are part of this work group and the implementation team. We also have the Department of Behavioral Health and Intellectual Disability Services, and that's part of some of the stuff that we are looking at to address. At times, it does happen in some schools. I don't know that we have as coordinated or as robust of a plan as we would like to have, but that is some of the stuff that we are thinking about and will be working on, both in the subcommittees and then eventually at the executive level.
And we'd be happy to do that with you. This has been a conversation that's been going on for us for over a decade when we were dealing with significant amounts of issues at a particular high school that had to be litigated through federal civil rights, U.S. Department of Justice, in fact, to get the district to kind of respond in the proactive way that it did. In the years since the settlement expired, I know that the district has moved away from it and has focused in more on district-wide level stuff rather than what happens for specific school communities. And I think it's worth it because your police captains and your district captains are dealing with immediacy within a school community in the immediate hours after something happens. It's also recognizing the level of trauma and how abnormal it is for young people to witness violence on their streets than go into an institutionalized setting where it just basically doesn't get addressed for young people in a meaningful way. And so, it is an ongoing dialogue for us, but it's helpful to hear your perspective. I just encourage you not to look at district level and high level police commissioner level kind of dialogue, but what actually happens school by school, because I think it's not coordinated. I think you'll see it's pretty haphazard. Some schools respond really well. Others really struggle to understand what's going on. Do I have time for one more quick question?
Yes.
Okay. Could you talk a little bit about your pilot around police-assisted diversion? I think it was launched in one of your districts last year. I'd be interested in hearing a little bit about it.
I'm going to bring up Julie Wertheimer, the Senior Director from Office of Criminal Justice. The police-assisted diversion is under her, and she probably can give more detail.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Council Member. Julie Wertheimer, Senior Director, Criminal Justice, MDO. We launched police-assisted diversion as a pilot project originally in the 22nd Police District in a soft launch phase at the end of 2017 and then more officially at the beginning of 2018. We then expanded it to the 39th district. Again, this was on one shift in each district, I should note. And then more recently in November, as part of the Resilience Project, expanded it to a target area within the 24th Police District. For those who aren't familiar, police-assisted diversion is a pre-booking diversion program that individuals can either enter through what we call an arrest referral, which does involve contact with police, or a social referral where someone or their family member or loved one proactively asks for supportive services. It is rooted in harm reduction, and therefore services and following through with treatment are not required. They are just encouraged, and we try to meet people where they are, both in terms of their readiness to accept help and literally in their neighborhoods.
Thank you very much. And
Before you, can you expand on that to what I used to call day reporting centers, and now I call what?
Neighborhood resource centers?
Yes. Can you, because that's a continuation of what the councilwoman talked about, just for a brief explanation.
Sure. Neighborhood resource centers are a joint effort that have been going on for some time in terms of feasibility stage by all the criminal justice partners, have been led by Councilmember Jones, as well as some of our other leaders in the criminal justice system, especially in the First Judicial District and adult probation, as well as our office. And neighborhood resource centers, which are proposed to be piloted in FY20, are meant to be locations within the neighborhood where adult probation will be co-located, but individuals will also be able to access supportive services while checking in with their probation officers.
How much have we appropriated for that? And then I'm going to turn it back over to you.
In FY20, I believe in the managing director's budget, it's just under $1 million, with the 5-year investment being about $11.8 million.
That would be helpful going forward. This year, 5-year periods of investment. And when you have something that you're rolling out, like a deterrent program, I love my brother, but that's a different district. I'd like to know when the rotation gets to mine as well.
thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. You know, as we're talking a little bit, could you talk a little bit about what your top line priorities might be in terms of addressing juvenile justice issues in the budget coming up? Do you have some top areas that might see a more significant increase in investment in particular, and what you hope to have accomplished?
So there is money in the budget to increase YVRP, as we call it, or the Youth Violence Reduction Partnership. That is centered towards young people who have already been identified as being at the highest level or highest risk of either killing or being killed. The ages are 17 to 24. There is money in the budget for that, a targeted increase for that, so that we can expand into additional police districts. And there is also money allotted for an increase to, we call it CCIP, Community Crisis Intervention Program, which is where we have credible messengers who are out in the community. We kind of call them boots on the ground, who will be oftentimes the people that they are working with are juveniles in that particular community as well.
And how do you identify the juveniles that are most at risk? Are they identified individually? Are they identified by a demographic? Are they identified by geography?
So the YVRP, they are already identified because they are on court-ordered supervision or probation, and so they are identified that way. For CCIP, we are geographically distributed throughout certain districts in the city, and it is not solely targeted to young people, but by virtue of looking at the data in terms of who is committing crime, both and also the victims of crime. In this roadmap to Safer Communities, our targeted population was age 16 to 34.
Yeah. Interesting. I mean, for me, it's always been, you know, especially for young people, how profound it is to have young people who are victims of a crime and then become perpetrators later on. Is there a coordination that you have intended between YRP and the school district?
Coordination that's tethered on the YVRP. There is a steering committee or governing board. School district is part of that,
right,
as well, yes. And also as part of the roadmap to Safer Communities, as we're trying to coordinate in general and connect all of these dots. School district is there. The Office of Violence Prevention is there and able to connect the pieces as we see moving forward.
Well, I'd love to keep communicating with you a little bit about this effort and
Sure.
see what we can do more on the school's end to support the work of the youth violence reduction project. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Councilman Johnson?
Yes, so now I want to go into the proactive component of the budget. I know I asked a lot of questions regarding law enforcement, and I'm sure you am passionate about making sure that we get those who have no regard for life that carry guns off the street. And so I'm glad I had a chance to address some of those questions. And I'll talk about spot shotters at another time. I think that's a very innovative approach to addressing gun violence. With the current technology right now, you hear gunshots. Do you get a tweet on your phone that says there's a shooting that's taking place at 17th and Dickinson, and you're able to look at your phone with an alert?
24 hours a day. It's not a gunshot. It's when we have a shooting victim.
Shooting victim.
Shooting victim.
Okay.
The information's put out to all our commanders immediately, quickly followed up by a almost real-time intelligence on who may be involved, what it may be about, and then further intelligence briefs later down the line when they really dig into it.
Are you familiar with spot shotter technology?
Yeah, I was on the committee when we piloted that, when we first piloted
How did the
that.
pilot work? Like, why aren't we using it now? Just want to get an idea.
We are. We currently use it. We don't. ShotSpotter was a name brand. We have acoustic gunshot detection system, and what happens is when one of those audios kick, it automatically sends an alert to the real-time crime center. It indicates which camera is it hit on, and then we begin to monitor all the cameras surrounding that area.
Okay.
Once whatever activity we see, we're immediately broadcasting that over to police radio. It goes out to police radio immediately, telling them that there was a gunshot detected in and around the area of A and Westmoreland.
Okay.
We converge on that area and start surveying. So it's a comprehensive visual check as well as an immediate response.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Ms. Vanessa, how are you today?
I'm great, thank you.
Good. So a couple questions. So one, I want to find out, what's the status, and last time I talked to you was regarding the RFPs for, there's been this talk for about a year, right? Specifically around supporting the boots on the ground organizations, right? To be up front, I think we are long overdue. That's not anything to do with you because you're new to this position, but we have a significant amount of organizations who are out there helping law enforcement, helping other individuals who want to see the reduction of gun violence here in the city of Philadelphia. They're doing the work and they're looking to us for just levels of support, right? You take organizations like Amir, Every Murder is Real. They're on the ground comforting families and individuals who are victims of gun violence, right? They need support. You have the Philadelphia Anti-Violence Coalition. That organization is on the ground holding the prayer rallies, the marches, just to give the neighborhood and the city some hope. Because when they turn on the 6 o'clock news, the typical person in the city of Philadelphia, they see that crime is going up, and then, agents of government that say, well, something along the lines of violence crime is down and homeless, I don't know. But bottom line, people don't feel safe, they just won't feel safe. And we all on the same team because they're not just looking at it as it's the mayor or Councilman Jones or Councilman Gim. They say all of you who we pay our tax dollars to aren't keeping us safe, right? So I want to let you know this is all of us, but in terms of people being responsible for doing their individual jobs, I just want to get an idea where we're at in the RFP process because this has been going on for a while. The amounts that will be allotted to the individual groups, because I've made some recommendations to some people who approached me. They kind of like, well, Councilman, I reached out, and the amount that they said that they were, well, we grateful, but we do top level work. So why are they trying to give us such a significant small amount of money? So I really want to get to that part because I remember under one administration, we had the Mayor's Office of Community Services. I remember when the Office of Violence, I remember when the youth violence reduction program actually started, there were dollars for us to do grassroots advocacy work on the ground. We also have the curfew center, and it was just an opportunity for people who were on the front line who wanted to get involved, so all the work wouldn't be on the police officers. They wanted to step up. They had the resources to do it. So I just want to get an idea of where we're at in that process. That's the first part of my question. And then the second part is I've been talking to Michael DeBardinas and then most recently Brian Abernathy about the Model Cities Employers Program, right? That's the program that if you have a felony and you have some type of background because you made a mistake, you still have an opportunity to get seasonal employment with the city if you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. How does that fit into this strategy
Understood.
to get our young men and young ladies an opportunity to get involved in something that's positive after standing, as opposed to staying on the corner? And I will say, when I reach out to Jim, he would say, Councilman, I say, Jim, we got to address this issue of youth gun violence. He say, and the best way to do that is by giving somebody a job. Well, you have a Model Cities program that can get these young men off the corner. I want to get an idea what's the investment that we're going to be doing in that program to help young men and young ladies get involved in something that's positive. So twofold, RFP, the Model City Employees Program as well as it relates to this gun violence strategy.
Understood. With regard to the, I'm sorry. Understood. With regards to the RFP, we're calling them targeted community investment grants. We had originally posted RFP, got some responses that weren't quite as responsive or robust as we needed. We reposted the RFP. That just closed on March 11th. We hope to be sending out an award letter no later than the end of this week, but may go out even sooner to a candidate. So that final selection is being finalized and we'll be sending out an award letter. The RFP was for a fiduciary to be responsible for the administration of the grants and document collection, auditing purposes, and everything else. In terms of the dollar amounts that are the grants, we're anticipating somewhere around as low as $500 to $1,000, and the maximum grant at this time was $20,000. Now, the thought process around that was so that I wholeheartedly agree with you that there are a lot of community organizations that have been doing really good work and have not been getting resourced necessarily by the city, partially because they might not have the infrastructure or the other wherewithal to navigate a contract with the city and to go through city contracting process. And so keeping that in mind, trying to keep the grants in a certain numerical area so that we would be able to administer as many as we could to these various organizations. And the levels of the grant, like I said, could vary depending upon what the proposal is that they're asking to do. There will be an application process. We hope to have the applications up no later than April the 1st. And we will be doing the selection process so that we can try to get the actual grant awards out no later than May 1st.
Okay. Quick questions, rapid fire. How are, and we're going to, because I have one other panel I'd like to come up. How are you working with the Defenders Association and the District Attorney's Office? Talk about that relationship.
So we do all work together because we are our criminal justice partners. If you're asking me with regards to this particular plan, we have done some briefings for the District Attorney's Office, are in the midst of trying to coordinate a more extensive briefing and just sort of work group session for us, extensive meaning several hours, where we can go over the pieces that we're doing. Pieces of the plan are certainly pieces of things that we've talked about in conjunction with many of the other parts of some of the criminal justice work and reform work that's going on. Much of the plan is very heavy sort of in that social services piece, as you know. Same thing with regard to the Defender Association. I think we all agree that you can't police your way out of this situation, and we all want to look at other types of planning and robust ways to come out of it. Part of our plan includes as you just talked about with Julie Wertheimer, the neighborhood resource centers, it's part of the strategy around the reentry program. Certainly, Defender and everyone else is involved in that, and would love to see, as you know, we're all on that same committee in terms of trying to create those day reporting centers or neighborhood resource centers so that we can try to lessen the recidivism rate and certainly increase the success of those trying to reenter into their communities.
Councilman.
Is there any strategy around being supporters of families and victims of gun violence from a resource standpoint?
Very important that we would support families and victims of gun violence. Some of it is we have been presenting to and kind of working with that sort of victim services collaborative through the Department of Behavioral Health. In terms of in this budget, spelled out in terms of the dollar amounts, can't definitively tell you a dollar amount. Is kind of embedded in different places. Much of the victim services work, though, there is already victim service work directly coordinated with the police department, so there's funding there. The victim services work, a lot of it comes out of the district attorney's office. The funding for a lot of that work is there. But we certainly, as we look at the trauma, we do talk about in the plan specific. We know that neighborhoods and community need more trauma-focused care, and so there is some funding, and DBHIDS is at the table trying to coordinate what additional services do we already have in place that can be enhanced, and what new services may be needed, and thinking about that even in conjunction with as we think about the school district and what the needs may be there.
So specifically on the DA defenders, witness protection, witness relocation, and those kinds of systems that can be put in place. I'll never forget a person had information on, and this was before Mr. Krasner, I'm gonna say it 3 times, before Mr. Krasner, a detective pulls up right in front of someone who had information's house, knocks on the door, brand new suit, and talks to the person. They wouldn't answer the door because everybody on the block saw them pull up. We have to come up with better ways to safeguard people. And I don't know, or pretend to know, how criminal investigations are, but a little kid 10 years old can tell you who the trigger man in some neighborhoods are, and who you better not ever cross, and so much so that they've created criminal enterprises in neighborhoods that have terrorized entire neighborhoods. I've read documents about people in fear, and I'm saying to you, we have to use intelligence. When we use intelligence, because we're going to lose our ability to get witnesses from the community. And so working with the DA, working with the defenders, working with the police, that triangle has to be in place, because there has to be a degree of confidence that A, I gave you information, B, you're actually working on it, and C, I'm safe from reprisal.
I want to push on 2 other points, and then I'll hold off on my comments until the next panel come up. Just something to take in consideration as we move forward. And I think it's already in the plan that I read. The trauma-informed support. I remember Curtis Jones and myself, we did a marathon hearing on gun violence. And this is why we have a separate session just for other individuals to come and give testimony who actually are being impacted. And I think we started at 10 that day, we left at 7 in that evening.
That's why we couldn't do both.
And somebody challenged me about this the other day, and it gave me a chance to reflect upon where I come from way before I became a council person, way before I became a state representative. I was one of those young men with a juvenile probation stint with Judge Reynolds. He was the judge at the time. He would say, look out on the ledge, and how many birds you see, that's how long you're going to be away. But through the grace of God, I was able to stay home and go to school while I served out my juvenile probation time, right? And I say that to say, how are we, what's going to be the strategy to focus on trauma-informed support, right? Councilwoman Gilman and myself been addressing this issue at Glen Mills, right? Where some of these young men may come home more hardened than they were before they went in there, just when their interaction with staff, right? But most importantly, we have some of our young people living in shell-shock communities. Any school you go into, and it's sad how young the children are, but any school you go into, let's just start with elementary, and let's start with elementary school. And I go do a presentation and say, how many children inside this room have seen someone murdered or shot? And the last school I was at was Tilden Middle School. And everyone raised their hand. That's not normal behavior, right? And so if you can just talk about the level of investment in that particular area. And then also, I want to go back to, again, when I look at Mr. Moses over there, who represents Philadelphia Anti-Drug, Anti-Violence Network, that's one organization that's doing good work. But I believe if we're going to invest over $30 million over the next 5 years, right, that can't be the only organization that's on the street doing the work, right? Because, and I say this because when we look at the level of violence that's taking place and the level of intervention that's needed, the police can't do it all on their own. We need teams across the city strategically. So when these homicides do happen, right, you got PAN showing up at the hospital room because that's where everybody decided to go do the retaliation in one part of the city, right? You got NOMO showing up in South Philadelphia saying, wait a minute, we know what's going on in this area. You got Bilal and his crew in Southwest Philadelphia addressing the issue. And I'm not sure why we haven't gotten there yet, right? Because to me, it's just getting everybody in the same room. As long as everything's done in decency and transparency, and there's accountability in terms of how the check is, cashed and so forth, put these people that come home from prison that want to help our community, give them like a little extra incentive to get out on the street and help us. A lot of these people are just working because they just care. But I just believe and I'm not sure why we're not there yet. I'm just being honest with you, right? Why we aren't there yet, but we're in a crisis. And like I look at the work Maria is doing with the opioid crisis, and we want to address it, right? But the MDO office, they up there like every weekend, clean out encampments and, doing the Narcan trainings and so forth, which is great, but we need that same level of urgency, right, when it comes. And I know you're doing your piece, but I'm saying we got to figure out how we even step it up even more. We have the money now and the commitment, right? But in order for this budget to move forward, we need to see that level of passion to say, you know what, these babies are dying. And Vanessa, I know you care about it, so it's not a question do you do it because you come from DHS. But that level of like passion and saying, look, enough is enough. I'm with it to go get the shooters, get them off the street. I don't care if people say, oh, yeah, you can't just say that. Look, get them off the street. I have 2 African-American boys growing up in this city. There was a report that came out the other day and said the life expectancy of African-American men is very, very short, right? Based on zip codes. And no one knows I'm a councilman. Well, they do in Point Breeze, but at the end of the day, that's not going to stop somebody from knocking me or somebody else upside our head. Or my kid may come outside in the morning and they sitting on the step. Something may happen, but I just say all that to say, if we focus on the trauma-informed, that backstory as to why this 15-year-old kid was a terror and is shooting up the whole neighborhood, right? How we focus on that aspect. And then I want to reiterate again for the record, because I've been working on this issue for a while, and I'm sure now why we haven't gotten there yet. Just the boots on the ground, the support, and like organizing them, and like, the leadership saying, okay, we're going to split the city up into zones, right? And we're going to go out there and tackle this issue. Because people need to feel some hope. And sometimes they feel like, and see it, that we care. And obviously, we know you care because the mayor stepped up and said, you know what, I'm going to put some actually dollars behind this actual plan. So we just don't have a plan. But we have some resources to get some things done. So that's it.
Thank you, Councilman. So we have another panel. Stick around, because we may need to call you back up. Are you going to respond to his You were? I cut you off?
I just wanted to ensure Councilman Johnson that I share his level of urgency, as does the administration. I am part of that resilience project as well, certainly, but my primary focus is this project here. Tuma Alexander, who has been heading the resilience project, is on the executive level subcommittee to ensure the level of urgency from the administration. The mayor himself came to implementation team meeting. We've had the mayor's chief of staff at the meeting. We've had the managing director's office at the meeting. Everyone from the administration and from all of the agencies understand that this is a top priority for this administration now. And that's why we meet bi-weekly, every other week, which is a heavy lift for that executive level team, and weekly for the other team, and daily for those of the folks on my team and the Office of Violence Prevention. We definitely understand the urgency.
So we realize this is a work in progress. This is a beginning, not an end, but we want to see the progress continue. Went from an idea to a plan that may wind up with some money. And so that is the purpose of these hearings. And with that, keep up the good fight,
Thank you.
all right?
Thank you for
Ms.
allowing us to
Williams.
testify.
Who's our next group to testify?
Councilman Jones would like to call up George Mosey, Prison Commissioner Blanche Carney, and Dorothy Johnson Spite.
Huh? We will schedule a time for disruption, but it's not right now. That's all right. And don't look surprised, Ms. Spite. Sit down. I know you are, but I'm getting ready to come out to see you. I just wanted on the record what it is you do, and that part of the program is important, in my opinion, to that. You said, I didn't prepare for this. So, Mr. Mosley, you are a star of stage and screen. You have your own movie. I saw it up at the Pennsylvania Crime and Delinquency. I wanted to jump up when they were showing it and say, no, I know, Mr. Mosley, I do, I really do. So I wanted all of you to get it on the record. Particularly, Commissioner, I understand that there may be a plan to actually deconstruct the House of Correction, and I hear in its place there might be a trade school going up there. If the answer, you didn't know?
No,
okay.
I'm waiting for you to.
All right, well, we'll start with Ms. Spite.
You're starting with me?
Yes.
Oh, okay, thank you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Thank you for the opportunity. My name is Dorothy Johnson Spite. I am founder and executive director of Mothers in Charge. Founded the organization over 15 years ago, in May of 2003, after my 24-year-old son, colleague Jabbar Johnson, was shot 7 times over a parking space. Have been here at this table many times. We have been on the front lines for the last almost 16 years, doing violence prevention, intervention, support to families who've been affected by violence. Now we're also involved with reentry, because we understand it's not just one fix or one thing. So we have folks who are involved in violence prevention, but also reentry and supporting those who have made a bad choice and those that are coming home, to support them to stay home with their families and to also not make bad choices and decisions. So I've been on the Philadelphia Prison Board probably for maybe 10 years or so, and saw inside things that were needed, provided that type of support to inmates, especially females at Riverside Correctional Facility. We do a program called Women Working for a Change, which is women coming home, women who oftentimes mothers, most of them are mothers that are at Riverside Correctional Facility. We provide services to those families to help them be home with their children, because we realize that if a mother's not home, oftentimes, with her son or daughter, they become a victim or perpetrator of violence. So we do that kind of work. What you're referring to, and I'm looking forward to seeing you tomorrow evening, is something called Participatory Defense. It's a community-based program that we partnered with Chief Kira Gray at the Philadelphia Defender's Office to provide resources and support and understanding to families who are caught up in the criminal justice system. It's like a maze oftentimes. If you've never been involved in that system, you have very little knowledge of what to do in such a situation. So Mothers in Charge holds weekly meetings at our office at 520 North Delaware Avenue every Tuesday evening for families to come and support their loved ones who have been caught up in the criminal justice system and they don't have a clue what to do to support them. Our goal is to be a support to the lawyers, the prosecutors, the judges, to help them understand that person who is before them, not just the charges, but who they are, in hopes of oftentimes getting the best outcome for that particular person, so that maybe they're not taking a deal that they shouldn't take, or just not even understanding the system that they're caught up in. We want to help families. This is a community initiative. We have volunteers who come weekly to support families to address mass incarceration, which is oftentimes a maze for so many families in this city who have loved ones who are caught up in it.
So
I have someone here. I'd like just have him, if he could say just one word or two. I'd like to call Pastor Clay, who is a volunteer at Mothers in Charge, to talk a little about his involvement with participatory defense.
Pastor? So while you're coming up, come on up. I want you to think about a question, an answer to a question. You guys, from one aspect or another, have been so involved in the violence and the protection of the citizenry, all of you. One thing, if you had a, magic budget, one thing that we could add to the arsenal to prevent violence, what would it be? So I'm gonna give you the time it takes for Pastor to talk about his, and then come up and answer that. Because I know your history, I know your involvement. What would that one thing be? Pastor, say your name for the record.
Reverend Harold Emmanuel Clay, Jr. Good afternoon, Councilman.
Good afternoon.
We are partnering with Dr. Dorothy Johnson Spite at Mothers in Charge and working with the Participatory Defense Hub. Part of what we're doing is meeting with individuals on State Road. We also meet with them at the hub, families of individuals who are on State Road at our hub, at Mothers in Charge, and we're also meeting with their attorney or public defender out in the community, and then we support them when they are in court, when their matter has a date. I think you asked what is one thing that we could do. As a result of our support of these individuals, we've gotten a lot of credibility, if you want to call it street credibility. And so we're also getting information on issues, conflicts in the community because we have partnered with these individuals in connection with their court matters. And we've been able to successfully mediate, which is a key word, a number of disputes, potential shootings, and actually arrive at a truce or peace agreement with individuals who've done some shooting and individuals who've been shot and were fortunate enough to live. And so we've been able to prevent future retaliatory shootings. And so I would recommend what Dr. Dorothy Johnson Spite is doing is inserting ourselves, herself, our hub on the ground in the community. That, of course, requires significant time and commitment. Dr. Dorothy Johnson Spite at Mothers in Charge is also supporting victims where family members have lost loved ones to gun violence. The result of that, and part of what we do for Mothers in Charge and Dr. Johnson, is we communicate with the families of victims. We're getting information through that communication and support process that has been very helpful in solving some matters. And we are, for example, attending the funeral, providing grief support to the family. I specifically received through Mothers in Charge a list of homicides each week. We reach out to the father. My role is to talk to the father or the male and support them from information on an undertaker, a mortician, a church where they can have the service, grief support that's hosted by Mothers in Charge, and we attend the funeral, and we have a weekly men's group of individuals who've lost loved ones to gun violence that meets at Mothers in Charge, where we offer them support. We also help them with compensation. And Councilman Johnson was earlier asking about funding and dollars. And so we can increase the Army that is on the ground, that is boots on the ground. But of course, that requires funding. And a lot of what Dr. Dorothy Johnson Spite does at Mothers in Charge, anger management classes, grief support, is done just however she can figure out how to do it, but often without the support that would be so essential. So I would offer mediation on the ground where we have relationships, where we have street credibility, that is critical. And I think if we look at expanding the school day and making school meaningful, where we have different things going on from 3 to 6 to 7 p.m., where our young people are not on the street, they're at the school, that school becomes a safe haven, and then we have intersectionality and information sharing, and we make sure that every at-risk child is identified, has a social worker, has a police officer, has a faith leader, has a counselor, and is being monitored and is being met with on a weekly basis. We know, we can see already that we are reducing the incidence of gun violence. We've already succeeded in negotiating a truce in a number of potential devastating circumstances.
So I had an opportunity to attend the awards recognition a couple of weeks back. Had no idea the depth of what you guys do, which is prompting tomorrow's deeper dive. But I can tell you from the responses in the room that it's deep into the community. And all you have to do is look at Criminal Justice Center in the mornings and see those lines and see how daunting and kind of alienating that process can be to someone who seems outnumbered by lawyers, judges, police. But when they have that support system, there is not the sign that says, all ye who enter here abandon all hope. There is an opportunity to come out the other side a better person. And so I appreciate what you're doing.
Yeah, I just wanted to say in closing that we do, and we are so rooted, engaged in the community. I mean, even with the anger management program that we've done for many years now, where we get referrals from courts and adult parole and probation to help change the mindset. Someone comes in, I'm not angry, I don't need to be here, but 9 sessions later, they've gained tools which will oftentimes prevent them from going out and making a bad choice and acting on that anger. So anger, trauma-informed care, grief support, these are all the things, and now participatory defense. It's a way to improve the quality of life in our community across the board for every man and woman in the city of Philadelphia. We want to do all that we can, and it's not just about Mothers in Charge and me and my son's murder, but it's about how do we engage others across the city to make a difference and have a better quality of life for all of us.
You've been so consistent at that, and in any spiritual group, the art of forgiveness and then empowering people through that forgiveness is like amazing to me. So it's an extension of where you are, and I appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right? Okay, so I gave you enough time, right?
Yes, you did, Councilman.
All right. Mr. Mosley, can you join us back? So,
So,
you
Councilman,
spend a lot of time dealing with an aspect, a segment of the population dealing with the violence issue. If you had one thing that you would encourage city government to do, what would it be to stem the violence?
Early intervention and assessment. Historically, people were aging up into the criminal justice system and they end up with me. So at the early onset, as we start to observe developmentally in communities, we need more early intervention and assessments, and to look at the intersectionality of trauma, underreported assessments for behavioral challenges coupled with poverty. And this is a holistic approach. We're not just treating individuals, we're really looking at what are the symptoms, and you can only do that when you're doing early intervention, because there is opportunity to divert from incarceration if a person is engaged early enough with the supports. That's the front end approach. The second end approach is really to scale up the support of violence prevention. They are doing great work in the community, but again, scaling up, and to have that mediation work and to support that, because everything does not have to escalate up. It can be done through mediation, but you need that group and to scale them up with Shondell Revelle and his team. And they're really experiencing some promising doing that. But it has to be, it's not a one-size approach. It's not a one direction. It has to be early intervention so you can divert people out of the criminal justice system. And I think a lot of what we're doing is the aftermath. Once it's happened, we're picking up the pieces, but we have to build that structure, that infrastructure, that when people and our children are exposed to just a variety of traumatic events, we need to have systems in place to bring them in, but also family. We treat in silos oftentimes. You have to bring the family unit together. You have to have that component where mom can come in with the child. Oh, and by the way, there's an older brother that we didn't even know about that was there that needs intervention. So you have to treat the family as a unit. And that would be my suggestion.
Thank you for that input. Mr. Mosey.
Yep, I'm George Mosey. I'm the Executive Director for the Philadelphia Anti-Drug, Anti-Violence Network. After 28 years as a prosecutor, I was really blessed and honored to become the Executive Director at PAN. One of the things that I came to recognize as a prosecutor is that prevention is the very best strategy for effectuating public safety. And I would stress to the city, as I always do, that we need to invest in prevention. It seems that whenever the Budget Act is about to come down, the first place it lands is with prevention. You know, prevention in many ways isn't sexy, and prevention is very difficult to prove. If we're looking for empirical outcomes and a way to demonstrate that an approach is a best practice, it's very difficult to do that when you're talking about prevention. Often the question that we should ask, rather than what did we achieve, it should be what did we prevent? And it's difficult to prove a negative. Nobody knows how many lives have been saved by the efforts that the Office of Violence Prevention has already made. You just can't prove it. But you have to keep doing things that make sense. It makes sense to recognize that in large part we're talking about a population that isn't going to come to the community meeting. They're not going to come to the march. And so you have to go to them. What the Office of Violence Prevention has put in place already is an opportunity for us to go out and meet the people who need us the most. One of the things that I'm convinced of is that the vast majority of the people in the communities that have been hardest hit by violence are good people who want peace in their communities. But many of them, as you guys talked about earlier, they've been relegated to geographical parameters. Not just because they're afraid to go outside of that neighborhood, but because they're afraid to go outside of their home. And so the only way to reach them is to put the boots on the ground, to go out with resources intact. And this, for me, is, I guess, the recommendation, the sentiment that I would hope that everybody would adopt. You can't leave with just throwing some stuff at them. Even a job, an education, vocational training may not be enough because there has to be a change. You know, some of the ways that we approach life in those communities, the choices that are being adopted by those few who impact the many, that small minority that perpetrates the majority of the crime, they're not thinking right. And so a job alone isn't going to do it. And so those boots on the ground have to come equipped with not just resources, but an understanding of what the problem really is. How to talk through it. You know, the way that you were able to overcome some of your bad choices. You know, we have to talk about that. We have to talk about it in the schools. We have to talk about it in the community. We have to talk about it in the churches, in the masjids. It has to be a discussion, and it has to be made, and it has to be facilitated by people who actually know what they're talking about. Those credible messengers that Vanessa Garrett Harley was talking about, they're people who have lived this stuff. You know, people clapped when you talked about expanding the number of people who are involved in these efforts. We certainly applaud that. The most important word in the name of my organization, the Philadelphia Anti-Drug, Anti-Violence Network, is the word network. We need everybody involved, but we have to start at the beginning. Violence is wrong. We have to find a way to settle our differences without resorting to violence, and then we can talk about jobs, educational training, and everything else that will allow people in our communities to have an abundant life.
Councilman?
Sure. Thank you, Commissioner, for being here. Thank you, Mr. Mosey, as well. So give me an idea regarding paying the level of staff you have on the streets, what days they're on the streets, staging locations across the city of Philadelphia, and what type of resources are they equipped with when they go out into the community?
So I have two primary programs that have been discussed already at these hearings, the Youth Violence Reduction Partnership and the Community Crisis Intervention Program. Are you specifically referring to the Community Crisis Intervention Program?
Let me clarify it.
Yep.
I'm more interested in the crisis intervention team.
Yep. Okay, so right now we have 5 teams of 3 for a total of 15 team members. And there are 2 supervisors, a coordinator and an assistant coordinator. The assistant coordinator is actually the daytime person, so that we have somebody who can make linkages with the people who we need to communicate with, who may not be available during the hours during which crisis actually functions, which are 6 in the evening to 4 in the morning, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday.
6 in the evening to 4 in the morning?
That's right.
Okay.
And they're in every one of the districts where Pinpoint is operating, with the exception of the 15th district.
And what's so special about the 15th district that they're not there?
We just haven't been able to.
Exclusion.
We haven't been able to expand into the 15th yet.
Okay.
The 15th, however, is adjacent to the 24th and the 25th. So it's inevitable that we do come into contact with some of the stuff that either comes from the 15th or that goes into the 15th.
And why 6 p.m. to 4 a.m.?
Well, we know that a lot of stuff happens in the evening. When most of us are in bed asleep, there are things going on in the neighborhood. And the hope is that these credible messengers can actually interact not just with the viable leadership in the communities, with the good people, but also with the people who would be perpetrators. And so we've positioned ourselves to be there when nobody else is.
And what about, now statistics says most crime happen between 3 to 6, right? Young people get out of school and so forth. then that's just what some statistics says. How does that play a role in terms of data saying from 3 to 6 we see an uptick in crime and violence versus the 6 p.m. to 4 a.m. Shift?
I think that the research would say something a little bit differently if we vetted out some types of crime and concentrated solely on violent crime.
Okay.
I believe that the violent crime has been deemed to occur most often after that 6 o'clock time
And on
period.
the weekends as well.
Right.
And also, I remember under crisis intervention, right? No, paying as well. At something, I'm pushing back in terms of the time frame. You know, maybe our budget can kind of expand to kind of help out with the neighborhood turf wars that happens after school, like when the kids leave Orton Reed, right? And then the shooting happens or a fight happens that escalates to a shooting. How do we incorporate longer hours? Or from a programming standpoint, you guys just think that 6 to 4 is the way to go? Because I'm thinking when the kids get out of school, I used to work with you guys from a paying standpoint. I think you were in the district attorney's office, but when Mr. Mills was around, I remember going up to McDaniel School and calling PAN members because there was a local neighborhood fight that spilled out from the school into the streets, and we needed some folks from PAN to come and do the intervention to kind of get these kids to kind of stop from fighting, so we didn't want that to escalate to a shooting.
Well, and I certainly don't disagree with the need to have crisis intervention available at all times of the day. You know, maybe not 24/7, but we definitely need to be around Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, as well as Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and
So
Sunday.
is that a budget issue that you're only just for the weekends compared to Monday through Friday?
It always is. We try to make do. And, you know, I think you remember also that PAN had its genesis with the Crisis Intervention Network.
Yes, that's how it started.
And so when
yes.
they were using those strategies that you just talked about, the same strategies that we're trying to employ now to actually eradicate turf gang warfare back in the 70s and 80s, they came to recognize that they had to be there all hours of the day. They had to go into the schools as well as the community. Again, they had to go wherever the problem existed. And we try to do that. Remember, crisis, although it is a specific program, it's part of the Philadelphia Anti-Drug, Anti-Violence Network. And so when PAN gets a call that there's a problem at the Camelot School, and it involves young people from Strawberry Mansion, and of course that's during school hours, then Mike Harris is going to go to work.
Gotcha.
You know, old South Philly guy.
Yes.
He's going to be out there, and we're going to do what we can. Even though YVRP is pretty much relegated to working with individual clients, they're going to go into that school as well. And we're going to do everything that we can. And one of the things that I struggle with as an executive director who has to be conscious of just how much wear and tear I'm putting on my people, you know, I try to relegate their working hours to that 6 to 4, but I've got some committed people.
Yeah.
You know, Shondell calls and says something's going on and it happens to be at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Well, you know, I might try to say, come on, Shondell, let's try to get somebody else out there. But he knows, because these are the credible messengers, that they can best address the situation.
Yes.
And so we send them out. But you know, I got to be concerned. You know, I don't want to
So-
wear them out. So if I had somebody who could be there as part of crisis and work from, say, you know, 10 to 10, well, that'd be a great thing.
Well, I'm going to continuously, and I have my colleague here who's my partner on this issue, to consistently push, have this conversation with the administration regarding expanding. Again, I don't think it should just be PAN. I think PAN budget should be expanded, right? But again, like you just said, for the record, you know, you don't want your team burnt out because you can't do it alone. There's other boots on the ground organizations, for some apparent reason, I'm not sure, again, aren't partnering with the city of Philadelphia and actually provide them the resources to actually go out there and assist with PAN and do it in a coordinated effort. Like you talked about, it's a network, right? And again, I come from that old school grassroots, let's mobilize everybody let's inspire the community. I'm thinking about Anthony Murphy back there because he was there when I was a young pup, just getting started before I became an elected official, running my own organization, Peace Not Guns, and I'm just a little guy. I was calling him for resources. Well, can you help me out? I just want to do a basketball game with the cops to get the kids off the street. And can you spare a little bit for me, right? We cannot afford to not partner, but most importantly, be supportive of other groups that are sincerely out there doing work for free, right? And also, since PAN is the premier organization that the city is contracting with, like, your budget should be expanded as well as a part of the conversation, so we're not burning out the few individuals that you have. So I'm going to keep riding that issue, along with why I'm big on the job training and employment component. The city has a program called, Kurt, they have the blue jumpsuits, the young men.
It's
And they clean out the
Ready, Willing,
alleyways.
and Able.
Not Really Willing and Able. It's through streets.
the streets department.
The Streets Department has a program where you hire young men, regardless of their background, right? They clean out the alleyways and the streets come along and change the light bulbs, right? And I was so proud one day I was standing on the corner of 18th and Dickinson, same neighborhood I grew up on, same corner I grew up on, talking to some friends, and I seen like 15 young men, I almost cried, walking down the street with these blue uniforms on, laughing, talking to one another, right? These are young men, some had records, some didn't, right? But they had an opportunity to get involved in something that's positive, right? Some have been hired by the city, some want to do other things that are positive, but it's their opportunity to get involved in something that's positive, because you got the shooters, right, that's raising most of the havoc, and you got the wannabes that just want to be, right? Raised from a good family, but they want to hang out there around the guys that are so-called cool, right? But only if given an opportunity and somebody plant a seed in their brain that they can get involved in something that's positive and an opportunity, then they won't be standing on the corner because you're working a 9 to 5 and you're tired by the time you get home. That's where I'm at. So you have some allies and some advocates who want to back your play to continuously finding the resources that we need for these young people who are out there who need an opportunity to get involved. But we tell them get off the corner, all right, what are we replacing it with? Right? Because somebody will look at you like, well, my grandmother taught me as a kid, idle time is the devil's workshop. Basically, if there's nothing for you to get involved in that's positive, I'm going to find something to get involved in that's positive. You got some knucklehead telling some young kid, hey, take and hold this gun for me. Go sell this package for me, right? Take these Percocets, right? And next thing you know, we have another young person on that continuous cycle of raising havoc in our community. So I commend you, Mr. Moses, for the work that you're doing under PAN and stepping up to the plate from a leadership standpoint, making your transition in the DA's office. I know you're sincere. I've watched you over the years since, again, before I even became an elected official, working on this issue, and I know that PAN has the right person at the helm leading this charge. And also, Commissioner Carney, again, you had me do a tour up there talking to the young men on State Road. I know your passion, your commitment, and making sure that if these young men are going home, they don't return. And also, if they are going away for a long time, that we are instilling in them that this isn't the end of their life. They can also change while they're inside, and we just thank you for your leadership as well.
Thank you, Councilman. Anti-violence is a verb, it's not a noun. We have to do something. I don't do group well where we just toss around the problem. So this hearing is the verb. So we've got the green light from the mayor. Mayor Kenny, thank you. We've got good leadership in place to carry it out. Again, what this is about is trying to figure out how to put our money where our mouth is. And so we've raised some questions in this portion of the hearing, which you should take the opportunity to take back and put a price tag on it. How much does good cost? Good doesn't come without a cost. It's a verb. So we want to work with you. You have enough time so that when you come back to us for the budget, you can articulate that part, your part, whether it's Town Watch or PAN, whether it's the commissioner's responsibility or any intervention with community groups, as Councilman Johnson has said. So, do you have something else?
Yeah, I don't want to put the administration on the spot. I mean, I support the administration, but again, I come from eras, and I'm looking at Anthony Murphy in the background. We just come from that era of activism, flat out. That's just the bottom line. That's how Town Watch got started. I remember, and you just have boots on the ground advocating, fighting this issue 24 hours a day, 365 days out the year. And so I'm just going to advocate, and I'm going to fight just to make sure that the organizations that's out there doing the work that they are doing to reduce gun violence and to prevent gun violence have the level of support that they need. I just remember that era. I know the commitment is there, but from an action standpoint, we would like to go into this summer, and I've been advocating during the budget process for the last, specifically a little more aggressively, these last two budget cycles around this topic, and we're starting to see some true progress. We would like to go into this summer, like all out blitz in every neighborhood, the key areas that need to be addressed, and so we can be a model for the country on reducing gun violence. That's the type of commitment that we're looking for. That's the type of advocacy that we're going to fight for. That's the type of push that we're going to demand as we move forward through this budget process. And so I just want to state that for the record.
Thank you, Councilman. We have a window of time to do our work. I am not saying that, it wouldn't continue after this election, but I'd like to put the template in place before, with my colleagues' help, to put it in the budget, and working with the administration to make sure that your vision for the summer happens. So thank you for your testimony. We have one more person. Who do we have? All right. I don't mind. Good. You got to tell Ms. Williams. Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
And the clerk will also bring the last person to testify. Who we got?
Councilman Johnson would like to call up a member of the Special Committee on Gun Violence Prevention, Darren Tolliver.
Little bit of housekeeping while he comes up. The second part of this hearing will happen April 29th, 2 p.m. in this room. We want to hear more from the community. We wanted administration folks focused on this part so that we can give the time that it deserves, and it's not always at the end. Thank you. State your name for the record, and please begin your testimony.
Good afternoon, Darren Tolliver. I am with the Mayor's Commission on African American Males. I'm also a member of organization Black Men of Penn. We are therapists, social workers, doing work with individuals within the community on violence prevention and a lot of other mental health and behavioral challenges as well.
Darren, can you speak to the therapeutic approach as it relates to violence prevention, the reduction of gun violence, as a part of the strategy to get our young people involved in things that are positive, but most importantly, the therapeutic aspect of this particular issue?
I think one of the things where we need to really look at, and he mentioned prior, was the network piece, but it's the communication. You mentioned being on 18th and Tasker and different places. One of the things that I do and I take pride in is to be able to be on the ground, be in these communities, in these spaces, where you will find a lot of people not willing to want to take that risk because of violence or any foreseeable violence. So it's important to have a certain level of engagement when you're talking about working with individuals who are at risk. For example, if you have a young man who is graduating high school or trying to find his way through life, and he doesn't have anyone to give him any mentorship or proper direction, more than likely, they're going to pretty much subscribe to participating in an economy, underground economy. I know Dr. Williams talks about this. In order to live, in order to survive. So what do we say when we want to give those type of young individuals and we don't have the employment, we don't have that branch to offer them employment or opportunity? So that's when they, for the most part, turn to, to the streets in a sense. And it's part of like a cool pose reality for young men. A lot of people don't want to talk about it, but the reality is that's how people live. That's how they survive. It's not really nothing that's new, but it is what it is. And unfortunately, most of the violence that's happening, whether it's the victims or the perpetrators, they look like me and you. Some people don't want to talk about that. But I think that we need to really understand, even from a cultural sense, a cultural lens, to understand, to be able to reach them specifically, and how do we do it? And I listen to a lot of the approaches, even from the academia level, but even from, as he mentioned, from the old grassroots, parents, elders in the communities, and right now our communities aren't really necessarily healthy. And the mentors in the community who were supposed to be mentors are providing negative influences on our young kids. So at some point, we have to look at ourselves collectively and say, how can we, address this issue? And I applaud the city, I applaud council for taking this approach, but I think more has to be done. I still think that it's still a buffer that's still not able, that we're not still crossing that. We're not looking at it more critically in terms of what we actually need to do. I don't want to say that there's a generational gap from how things were to how things are being done now, but I still think we need to still look at certain ways. You look at elder statesmen like Sam Evans and other powerful people in the city throughout history who've done excellent work on the ground, moving forward to galvanize people to do the right thing. And I think that that's a piece that I think, for me, as a researcher, that's missing. And I really appreciate the effort, and I appreciate Councilman bringing it up. But I think it's something that doesn't really like to be discussed. And sometimes we just have to keep it real. I mean, the numbers they speak for itself. I'm researching right now juvenile homicide offenders from 1980 all the way up until now. Okay, so we're looking at all ethnicities, all races. For some reason, as I mentioned before, black males, okay, have been statistically higher than any other nationality or race between that period. And do we ever wonder why? Do we ever wonder why? You mentioned men coming out of prison and being able to speak back. We got guys who are returning into to the city, all right? Many of them don't have the opportunity because of bureaucracy, that they can't mentor young individuals about doing X, Y, and Z. I go to the prisons. I just came from SCI Smithville, and I listen to some of these lifers and juvenile lifers wanting to give back and wanting to work with kids about violence and gun violence. But there's challenges. I'm a therapist. I'm a social worker. I know the challenges, and I'm credentialed in trying to get into the school district to work with kids around PTSD and things like that. So when Helen Ginn was talking about, Councilwoman Ginn was talking about, she was vetting out the police department, It's not the police department's, they're not really trained on PTSD, trauma-informed care, harm reduction. Those things are left for social workers and therapists to be able to provide those type of resources for young individuals after witnessing a homicide or a shooting, all right? So it takes a collective effort, but it has to be more, and it can't just look good on paper, all right? And I think that at some point in Philadelphia, that was going on for some period. And I think that now, with the administration's press conference that was in January, that the clock is on now. You know, we want outcomes. We want to be able to see transparency. We need a level of accountability. And for me, I never really seen that in the past, but I am definitely looking forward to seeing how it looks in the future moving forward.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, no problem.
So I need, Mr. Mosley talked about it,
Sure.
that it's not just a job. It's not just some of the ancillary things that are on the surface, but what you're talking about is changing our mindset.
Correct.
And we want to incorporate some of that into a formal way to reduce violence. There are some places where committing homicide is just like unheard of.
Right.
That would be such, you know, I watch the news in some areas when that occurs, it's like a total shock to a system. Unfortunately, in some inner city communities, a teddy bear memorial is considered normal.
Sure.
And we got to make sure our children know that's not normal.
Right.
And I don't know how to incorporate that into...
Because people are so desensitized, especially in Philadelphia. You know, the most recent report, you know, they mentioned how violence is going down. But if you look at the number of homicides that have gone up in the city, we've surpassed, for a short period of time, it's a very small sample size, Chicago, who used to lead the country for long periods of time. So what does that say that a city like Philadelphia, a rich city like Philadelphia, is actually moving forward and actually challenging a city, a metropolitan like Chicago, in terms of homicides?
See,
What does that say?
Just a point of information. I'm glad you brought that to my attention because I had a constituent taking me to task the other day on social media saying we surpassed Chicago. And I'm like, no, we didn't. I thought I might have missed something. Now, obviously, I must have. So you're saying we, for a short period of time, we surpassed the homicide rate?
I mean, we're only looking at months. I mean, in terms of where we're at right now.
Okay, I
based
got you.
on the year. But that's
not total, but you mean in
no,
terms
absolutely
of
not.
month to month.
No, right, correctly. Now, here's the thing. We know that violence and homicides, it ebbs and flows. It's going to always be like that. But what we want to do, and you know, it's been the highest since 2007. What we want to do is to find a way to keep suppressing those numbers down. But the only way to do it, I think we have to have these honest and open dialogues, not just in here. This is almost like speaking to the choir. We have to have them in those communities, those spaces that you mentioned, the 7th, the 18th and Taskers, or certain parts of West Philly. I know you up in Winfield. Those are the guys who I talk to every day. When I say boots on the ground, I do this every day. I don't do it. I do it because I'm passionate about it, as you can, and he can attest to it. And I think individuals need to see the realness about it. They don't want to see it because if there's a dollar attached to it. I need to know that you really have, and genuinely have my best interests at heart, okay? So when there's a police officer who's working with Brother Bilal who's talking about, he has a program, Turning Up, where the police are in the community and they offer
Erica
jobs.
Atwood program.
Right.
The one she wrote.
But one of the, and that's actually, it's a great program. It's great. But one of the challenges is getting young brothers on a corner to buy into it instead of buying into their own victimization. So what I like to do, I'm that liaison. I think that as a social worker, that's what we do. I create linkages. We create linkages. But you have to do it in a way that's not necessarily from the academy. You have to do it in a different way to be able to say, listen, brother, I understand.
Gotta bring Meek out.
Pardon me?
Go.
Bring that.
Gotta bring Meek out.
Well, yeah, that's true. That's true too. But it gives a sense of realness. But it also, it allows them to be able to articulate their concerns without feeling that they're being
Judged.
Judged.
That's
And
true.
So-
once you get
We
that,
did that
and
one
one thing
before.
I've learned as a therapist, once you're able to connect, I don't care if I can connect with you or I can connect with a young man on the corner, you're looking at a person's humanity. Once you're able to do that and the door's open, they'll tell you whatever you need to know. And you'll develop that relationship. And then when you say you want to have people in the positions, those are the ones who are qualified to say, hey, I know this place that's hiring. I know this place that can offer those type of educational resources that you're looking for. You see?
So for me and my constituents,
Right.
there's a silent majority of folk who have been victims of this violence. And they don't protest, they don't come out, but I don't want them to be disheartened by the fact that a 60% or only a 40% closure rate in a homicide. There's a thing called justice. And that when you don't close a case, people feel like, well, did my child die in vain as well? Like, and is that person still out there that may kill another one of my children? So we have to figure out how to to prevent people from becoming perpetrators, but also dealing with people who have been victims of it that never, ever, ever again will see their child ride down the street, go to a wedding, see another graduation, and feel hopelessness. You can't even forgive when you don't have closure about a case. You can't even forgive when you don't have closure as to why something happened.
You know, there's a term, perception shapes reality for many people. And, the old African proverb, the lion story, is never told if the hunter's the only one who's going to tell it. We have a lot of young men with some very unique stories and situations that people who are in certain positions, whether it's in politics, whether it's in a helpful capacity, they're not really listening to their story. But they're able to give the story based on what they think the numbers may say, okay? Which is one of the reasons why I'm using a grounded theory approach, a qualitative study, because I want to hear the stories from these young men's ears. I think you mentioned it earlier. How did they get up to this point to want to be able to say, I need to take this gun out and use it? Forget that. Let's go back. Let's go back and figure out what the issues. How did we get to this point? And I think once we start doing that, we'll be able to understand, some of the antecedents that lead them to want to say, I want to go shoot someone. It's very important, and I can't underscore it more. There is a huge disconnect in this city between what people want and what society wants, particularly what young men want, than what's being offered. The gap has to be closed, and I think that this is the approach that's being offered now by the Office of Violence Prevention and other departments, it's a start. We won't know the outcomes until about 5 years, nice longitudinal studies. We don't know. But we have to keep pushing it out there so that the people will believe that you care. How many people in your district know that this is a meeting that was held that's going to impact them?
Well, this is specific for the administration.
I understand that.
We have one coming up where the whole hood can come and express their opinion.
But the thing is, I think that it's almost like church. Some people don't want to go. Sometimes you have to leave the pulpit in order to walk out and be able to reach the people. I appreciate how you mentioned going to the doors and knocking and having these honest and frank discussions with some of these individuals about the things that is happening. What JC say, the streets talk. People know who the killers are, who the shooters are, before the police. It's not to say that the police don't know. They have a process of being able to work a case, and I understand that. But I just think, closing this out, I think that we really need to invest in listening to what our young individuals are saying versus telling them what they need to do. All right. Let's have a back and forth
dialogue and leave the credentials
At the door.
at the door, right?
All right.
All right.
Thank you so much for your
I
testimony.
wasn't able to, I didn't know I was going to speak today. I just came to
Yeah, well,
support,
you know,
Put you on the
but I
spot.
appreciate you
That
giving me
I
an
know the work
opportunity.
that you do.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Okay, this concludes, we're going to recess to the call of the chairs, the Joint Committee on Public Safety and Special Committee on Gun Violence Prevention for today. We will reconvene the second part on April 29th, 2 p.m. in room 400. Thank you for your participation.